So I would be talking today, as I have said, on the advances in anti-doping analysis, which have been taken place over the last few decades in a sports forensic perspective. The contents of this presentation contains a little bit introduction about doping in sports. What do we mean by drug testing in sports? What is the role of the WADA accredited laboratories? A few things about the anti-doping analysis. How do we do toxicological or analytical analysis for the prohibited substances and methods? Priority research areas which are coming up in anti-doping. Then few stuff about the anti-doping and forensic science, how they are like how they work in collaboration to each other and how they are complementary to each other, followed by the conclusion. So doping is not just a health issue, it is unfair to other athletes and in complete opposition to the idea of competitive sports that the best shall win in fair contest. This is the general consideration what we give to doping in social terms. So talking about doping, what is doping in scientific term is doping is the use of prohibited substance and or methods for the sole purpose of enhancement of performance in sports. That is what happens in doping when the sole purpose is just to enhance the performance in sports. There are definitions also given to the doping, which is given by IOC, that is the International Olympic Committee, which defines it as the use of any substance foreign to the body and taken with sole intention of increasing in unfair manner the performance of athlete in competition. Then there comes a definition by WADA, which is the umbrella organization of harmonizing anti-doping globally. WADA is actually the World Anti-Doping Agency, which has defined doping as occurrence of one or more anti-doping rule violation. So it is not only like someone has taken a performance enhancing substance, which is termed as doping. According to WADA, there are various kind of anti-doping rule violations, which if have taken place, that constitutes doping, and that is where forensic science investigations comes to existence, which we will be talking about in the further slides. Talking something about the World Anti-Doping Agency, which was formed in the year 1999 and is responsible for the World Anti-Doping Program worldwide. The main document which the World Anti-Doping Agency provides is the code, which is the core document defining doping policies and regulations around the world. Then comes the international standards, which are under the WADA code. So the code works in conjunction with the 8 international standards that aim to foster consistency among anti-doping organizations in various areas. As you can see below, there are 8 different international standards which are under the WADA code, based on which the anti-doping program worldwide comes into existence or is being followed. So these international standards are in terms of the prohibited list, which is updated annually, which comprises of all the details, what is banned, what is not banned, and what are the methods which are prohibited in sports and things like that, and all these international standards are available online on Google. If you'll just Google it, you can find the PDF copies of them. Then there is the second international standard is on testing and investigation, which tells basically the sample collection bodies that how do they need to target the athletes, which athletes should be targeted for sample investigation is the standard the anti-doping laboratories should follow when they are conducting their analysis. The next one is the international standard for therapeutic use exemption. As we all know, these drugs may sometimes be used by the athletes for therapeutic purpose. So we need to have a harmonized set of rules to say that when and at what circumstances the drugs can be allowed for therapeutic purposes, and so on. So these are different kind of international standards through which the anti-doping program is organized all over the world by WADA. The next question arises, why do we need to ban the performance enhancing drugs in sports? Obviously, because it is dangerous to the health of the competitor. It is unfair and sets bad example to young people. There is a risk of addiction if suppose stimulants and narcotics, which are also prohibited, and they definitely pose a high risk of addiction, and they can be painkillers also, again, which can lead to addictions. So those were the slides on what do we generally mean by doping. Then I would be talking something about drug testing in sports. So what is the intent of drug testing? It is to eliminate any competitive advantage that might result from ergogenic aids, protecting other athletes from injury by drug abusing athletes, and to promote fair competition in sports. By this, I means like if you can have a very good lay down anti-doping program, but you are not doing anything until you are not testing for it properly. So the anti-doping labs play a major role in having their testing methods more sensitive and more sophisticated so that they can do drug testing at zero tolerance to promote fair play in sports. A general thing about talking something about what is a drug, because I know the participants in this conference might need to be I would just like to give a little bit background out why we do it. So what is a drug? It is a chemical substance that interacts in the body to alter the biochemical system of the body, and it is always designed for medical and therapeutic purposes for the benefit of the society. What do I need to make clarify here, what do I need to clarify here is the drugs which are prohibited in sports. It's not like that they are being marketed for doping purposes. They are designed for medical and therapeutic treatment purposes for the benefit of the society, but are being abused or misused by the athletes. A little bit historical timeline of drug testing in sports. So we can see in the early age of 1970, only stimulant narcotics were termed as drug of abuse. So these were the first category of prohibited substances which were banned. This in the mid 1970s and 2000 came up the androgenic anabolic steroid, which contained synthetic steroids, beta blockers, diuretic, glucocorticosteroids, testosterone analogs, etc. Then came the age of protein chemistry and molecular biology, where came the hormone and hormone receptor modulators. There came up blood doping and few peptide hormones also, which can again increase muscle strength of the body, were prohibited and were being doped and thereby being prohibited. Then came the age of gene doping, which is since 2008 till present. So there are no substances, but cells, genes, and genetic elements, and modulation of gene expression happens under gene doping. In this slide, I have just tried to categorize various kinds of prohibited drugs which are banned and their ill effects. So, and with their examples. So like for example, narcotics, they affect the central nervous system and relieve pain. The examples are methadone and morphine. Then beta 2 agonists are also prohibited. They slow down heartbeat, reduces tremor. For example, they are used for asthma and therapeutic purposes, but they are being abused also. So for example, salbutamol, which is the normal inhaler which we use for asthma purpose. Selective androgen receptor modulators, which affect androgen receptor responsible for muscular fiber growth and stimulates growth of muscles. Then myostatin inhibitors, which again block myostatin effects, and it is a specific protein responsible for regulation of organic growth of muscle tissue. Then the anabolic steroids, which are the most prominent category of drugs which has been abused in sports, which increases muscle strength, resilience, and help quickly to restore after strenuous physical exercise. For example, nandrolone, stanozolol, etc. Then there are stimulants which stimulate and inside the central nervous system again and relieve physical and psychological fatigue. For example, cocaine, ephedrines, cannabinoids, which improves concentration of attention, which are derivatives of cannabis. Then peptide hormones and similar substances, which increases performance ability. For example, insulin, corticotropins, erythropoietins, etc. Then diuretics, which are mostly the masking agents, what I was talking about earlier. They regulate weight and reduce body liquid, used as masking agent to conceal other doping substances taken. For example, furosemide, probenecid, etc. Then glucocorticosteroids have qualities similar to adrenocortical hormones and relieve inflammation. For example, prednisolone, triamcinolone, etc. aromatase inhibitors, which increases one's own testosterone secretions, and they are prohibited, they are prohibited in sports as well. So in this slide, I have just given a general idea of what could go in a prohibited list, which is generated by WADA. So the prohibited list by WADA is published every year and is in general terms termed as the ban list. How many substances are banned? It's around 400 substances which are banned. So when I was talking about the different categories in this slide, this is just to show that comprising all the drugs which are banned in this under these in this slide are more than 400 compounds. That means in one single sample which comes to the laboratory, we have to screen more than 400 compounds comprising of all the categories in that particular sample. Just few general things about caffeine, alcohol, and salbutamol. So is caffeine banned? No, which is found naturally in many plants such as coffee and tea, cola nuts, cocoa, etc. It is included in the monitoring program. So WADA is keeping an eye on caffeine. It may become an anti-doping issue in the future. So monitoring program means they have been monitoring caffeine for last few years to see how much offense it can produce, and then it would be banned. So currently it is not banned. Then alcohol is banned. No, WADA has not banned, but different sports federation may have their own ban and regulation on alcohol abuse. Salbutamol, which is a general beta-2 agonist and is present in the asthma inhalers, which is being used, it is banned, yes, with a threshold of 1 microgram per ml. Threshold means anything in the sample below this 1 microgram per ml would not be considered a positive, but anything above 1 microgram per ml would be considered as a positive or adverse finding in the sample. Reason being, below the threshold, it can be the pharmacokinetic studies have shown that below this threshold, the therapeutic use of salbutamol would not produce a concentration above 1 microgram per ml. So the prohibited list 2022 has different categories of substances from S0, which is the non-approved substances. Here, non-approved substances means there are few substances which have been abused by the athletes and they obtain them from the gray market or from internet. So these are the substances which are still under their clinical trials and have not been marketed officially in the market, but still they can get it from internet or someplace else. So they are all categorized under S0. Then we talked about different categories which are banned. So these categories are banned at all times, which is in competition period and the out of competition period. Then there are few categories which has everything from this section. In addition, they have few other categories which are prohibited only during in competition. The main reason which for this difference is just because of the effect of these molecules or these drugs on the body. So like we see the stimulant, narcotics, cannabinoid or glucocorticosteroids, they have immediate effect on the body. For example, if I'm having a pain, I need immediate effect on the body. So I will take morphine and can run faster in a race. So this is only banned during the competition period. But if I have to grow my muscles, I might need to take an anabolic agent from last like 3 months or 4 months so that I can perform well in a competition I'm participating in after 3 months. So that's why these kinds of prohibited substances are banned at all times, and these ones are prohibited only during in competition. Then there are like beta blockers, which are prohibited only in particular sports, like during archery or shooting, where they need to stabilize their hand, reducing their blood pressure. So based on how the drugs are affecting the body, what is the time of their effect, what is their washout periods and things like that, the prohibited substances are categorized into different categories under the prohibited list. So as I talked about the in competition period and the out of competition period, the in competition period comprises of the competition and selection trials. So where the testing or the sample is collected during, after the competition, and the out of competition period comprises during the training period and the before competition period. So that is the out of competition periods where sample can be collected anytime before competition or during the training period. So anti-doping work must be transparent and produce forensically valid result to ensure public trust. This is necessary because unless we can say that the results are valid and whatever is been found in the sample has no way any kind of deviation from it, we cannot say that we are performing anti-doping in a transparent manner. So that's why the role of laboratories is important and it comes to existence. Talking something about the WADA accredited laboratories. There are a total of 30 WADA accredited laboratories around the globe. They are dedicated to the analysis of sports doping control tests, and they need WADA accreditation, which is based upon the compliance with two international standards. One is the ISO 17025 for management and technical perspectives, and the other one is the international standard for laboratories by WADA. WADA monitors the performance through a continuous external quality assessment scheme of these laboratories, and participation in the ICAFS is mandatory for all WADA accredited laboratories. So what happens in the WADA ICAFS scheme is it's a kind of proficiency testing scheme wherein few proficiency testing samples are sent every quarter to the anti-doping laboratories to test by WADA, where we don't know what is in those samples. We have to test them and we report the results. So every 3 months we get samples from WADA and they keep on monitoring our results, and an accreditation is granted at the end of every year based on the performance we have given in these ICAFS rounds or the proficiency testing rounds. Other than that, there is another kind of WADA ICAFS which is termed as WADA double-blind ICAFS. In this case, what happens is WADA sends few samples, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, combined with the normal samples coming from the sample collection authority or the testing authority. So it comes mixed with those samples and they just come to us and we don't know that these are actually the WADA ICAFS sample, and we just need to treat them as a normal samples and report the results. So this is how they're like on, it is a very stringent ICAFS guideline which the labs has to follow, which says that okay, we are performing in the correct manner, and WADA monitors the performance of the lab in that manner. So it's an ongoing performance monitoring which happens by WADA for the labs. So we can see that there are only 30 WADA accredited labs in the world and India has one.